I've always said I work because I love my daughter, but honestly, sometimes it feels like I live only because she exists. Like the thread that ties me to the world has her handwriting all over it. Her name is Emily, 9 years old. Bright uniform, fancy shoes, private school. The kind of place where all the other dads lean on clean cars with quiet engines and wear watches that blink tiny constellations of money. And I stand there with my old jacket in mechanic's hands, pretending I'm not counting everything I can't afford. Pretending the numbers in my head aren't screaming. And when I realized I had no chance at next year's tuition, not even close, that's when Joseph called, chewing into the phone like the world was casual, saying, "Matt, how you feel about an oil rig?" And I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. Yeah, sure, send me to the middle of the sea. But he didn't laugh, just said, "Serious. North Coast. Good pay, rough work. Told them you're solid." And somehow that was enough because Emily deserves better, so I said yes. On December 27th, the helicopter dropped me onto this metal kingdom that hummed and rattled and tasted like salt. And Joseph greeted me like a bad decision that worked out, shouting, "Look at this idiot," while handing me a helmet, and I joked, "Thought you said good pay, not death trap," and he said, "Same thing." The days blurred into tools and coffee and bruised knuckles until they felt like my life had always been bolts and valves. That's how I met Frank with his slow, steady voice, and Lydia with the sharp eyes and lemon shampoo hair, who made me nervous enough to ask dumb questions about pipes while she rolled her eyes and didn't walk away. One night she showed me the weird mineral, this faintly glowing thing like moonlight, trying to pretend it was harmless, and said, "It isn't in any database," in a voice that tried to be analytical but sounded like she was trying to convince herself. I hated how it made my skin crawl. Then New Year's Eve arrived with cheap decorations and heavier hearts. And we gathered in the lower levels joking because we were supposed to. That's when the sound came, a deep groan from under everything. I felt my bones hum and Joseph whispered, "Tell me you heard that." And before we could speak again, it came louder. This terrible, ragged scream that sounded like a person trying to peel themselves out of their own fear. And Lydia said, "Up." Now we ran, and the smell hit. Copper and burnt hair, and something rotten and wrong. What we saw didn't belong in the world. People tearing themselves apart, laughing, crying, scraping their faces. One man slammed himself into the rail, muttering, "Make it stop. Make it stop." Joseph yelled, "Don't look." But I looked anyway, and when one of them lunged, I swung my wrench and heard the awful crack. Frank said quietly, "Breathe later, move now." We pushed back to the machinery levels, adrenaline flooding everything, hearing our own voices break as we shouted directions over each other. Left. No, this way. Block that door. While the rig rattled like it wanted to throw us off. Until we sealed ourselves in the lab and Lydia pulled footage, whispering, "Please be nothing. Please be nothing." We watched that shimmering dust fall like glittering snow, and 30 seconds later madness bloomed across faces and I whispered, "We're dead," without meaning to. Then the door bent in like it was made of paper, and we ran again. When we saw that mass of bodies fused together sliding beneath the grates, Frank just choked out, "Jesus," and Lydia said, very calm, "Don't stop." When it caught Joseph and he screamed my name, I heard Emily's voice inside my head saying, "Daddy?" So I pulled and shouted, "Let go of him." Even though the thing didn't care about words, Lydia fired up the portable drill and yelled, "Move, Matt, move." When metal bit into the creature, it made that tearing whisper sound like 1,000 mouths praying. When it finally broke apart, we didn't talk. We just ran with our breaths making thin animal noises. Every hallway echoed with alarms and our arguments. Radio again. Try it. It's dead, Matt. It's dead. Then we're screwed. Until we hit the deck and saw the sea calm like it wanted to pretend we were safe. And then the rig shifted. Something massive rose from the center, dragging steel like veins, and Frank whispered, "We're not getting out." Lydia stared, calculating grief into math, saying, "We overload the pressure lines. Then the tanks, then gas." Joseph snapped, "That'll kill us." And she answered, "So we're doing nothing," and we split, shouting to each other through static. "Valve open. Locked here. Break it. Hurry." And all the while I kept hearing Emily say, "Don't screw this up," until finally Lydia screamed, "Go!" And we ran toward the lifeboat. The wind punched tears out of my eyes, and I swore I felt the creature behind us breathing. We dropped into the water, and then the world turned to fire. The explosion didn't happen fast in my head. It rolled out slowly, stretching time, light swelling like a second sun. The shockwave speaking in metal and thunder, Joseph yelling, "Down!" while I covered my head and prayed to everything. I saw the monster twist and dissolve into collapsing steel, like it was being swallowed by the thing that birthed it. We drifted afterward, and time stopped meaning anything. Day and night blurred into gray hunger and cold conversations. And sometimes I closed my eyes and heard that low sound again and wondered if it was still inside me. When we finally washed up on the island, everything was quiet in a way the ocean never is. Just wind through dry grass and waves breaking patiently, like the world had moved on without us. We moved slowly, almost reverent, gathering wood, dragging pieces of wreckage, building the help sign big and crooked, because it felt like the only thing we could control. At night by the tiny fire, the darkness pressed close and the sea glowed faintly under the moon, and we talked, really talked. Frank explained theories like a doctor trying to explain a nightmare, saying maybe it was a microorganism altered by pressure, something ancient that hijacked nervous systems. Joseph kept insisting it had to be extraterrestrial, that nothing born on Earth behaves like that. Then he'd laugh too hard and go quiet. Lydia stared into the fire and said we always assume the world forgives us when we pry it open. And her voice shook not from fear, but from anger. I thought about the dust, the glow, the sound, and how small we were next to all of it. Do you think it's still out there? Do you think anyone will believe us? And sometimes nobody answered because the truth felt too big for words. And when the fishing boat finally came and the captain asked what happened, I told him. We dug too deep and something answered. And while they wrapped blankets around us and poured hot tea, I kept thinking. Almost like someone was whispering from far below the water that maybe the glow never left. Maybe it was in our lungs, our clothes, our dreams, and that terrified me more than everything else, because I had done all of this for Emily, and now I didn't know if I was going home as a father or as something that should have stayed under the sea, waiting with the rest of whatever we woke up. When they finally brought us to shore, everything felt too bright and too normal. Like the world had no idea. It had almost swallowed us, like the air itself was pretending. And the doctors kept asking questions while shining lights into our eyes. Any nausea? Any hallucinations? Any ringing in your ears? And I kept lying, saying, "No, I'm fine," because the truth sounded insane and because I just wanted to get home. And at night in the small clinic room, I'd hear the ocean in the pipes and I'd whisper, "Stop," like I could talk it away. And Joseph would sit beside my bed saying, "We're heroes, man. We stopped something," and I'd answer, "We didn't stop anything. We just survived." And then he'd go quiet because some part of him knew I was right. And when Lydia was cleared, she didn't look happy, she looked guilty, staring at her hands like they were stained, whispering, "We should have left it there the first time the drill jammed. We should have taken the hint." And Frank tried to be steady like always, saying, "We didn't know. Nobody could have known." But she shook her head and said, "I did. I felt it." And I still pushed. And I didn't know what to tell her because I had pushed too. Just in a different way. Pushed myself into danger for money and called it love. They separated us after that. Different debriefing rooms. Different men in suits asking calm questions with cold eyes. Describe the substance. Describe the sound. Did you notice any unusual behavior before the incident? And I kept repeating, it glowed, it hummed, it felt wrong. And one of them smiled like it was a joke and said, "Rigs explode sometimes. Stress, fatigue, hysteria, grief. It can distort memories." And I wanted to grab him by the collar and say, "Then explain the fused bodies." But instead I just said softly, "We dug too deep." And he wrote something on his clipboard like I'd said nothing at all. When they finally let me leave, they handed me a check that felt too heavy and said, "Compensation," like money could bury what we saw. And I took a bus home because planes felt too small and too far from the ground. And at night during the ride I saw the glow in reflections. Little sparks in the window sliding alongside the trees. And sometimes I'd hear the whisper sound again. Like sand moving over glass, and I'd shut my eyes and say, "Not real," even though it felt real in my bones. Seeing Emily again almost broke me. She ran into me yelling, "Daddy." And I held her too tight and she complained, laughing, "You're squishing me." And I said, "Sorry, kiddo," and tried not to cry because I didn't want her to see how close everything felt to disappearing. And for a while life pretended to go back to normal school runs. Cheap dinners, bills, bedtime stories. But some nights I'd wake sweating, convinced my skin was too tight, convinced something was crawling just under it. And I'd whisper to myself, "You're fine, you're here. It's over," while staring at my hands like I didn't trust them. Sometimes Joseph would call late at night and just breathe for a while before saying, "You hear it too?" And I'd answer, "Yeah," and neither of us had to explain what it was. And Lydia stopped picking up entirely, then finally sent a message that just said, "Don't come looking for me. I'm working on something," which scared me more than silence, because I knew what working meant to her. Questions, experiments, trying one more time. Weeks later, I noticed a small patch of my garage floor glowing faintly when the lights were off, like somebody had spilled moonlight there, and my first thought wasn't panic. It was denial. It's nothing. Reflection. Trick. But when I knelt down, the air hummed, just a little. And I felt the old shiver run up my spine, and my heart whispered Emily's name like a prayer. And I just sat there in the dark, not touching it, not breathing too hard, thinking that maybe we didn't escape at all. Maybe the sea didn't keep it. Maybe whatever we woke up has patience and curiosity and all the time in the world. And that someday someone will dig again, or drill again, or pick up something that glows in the wrong way, and they'll say, "Look at this. How strange." And the world will pretend everything is fine until it isn't. And I'll be the idiot standing there saying, "We tried to warn you," while the sound comes back, deep and slow, like the earth remembering our names. I kept telling myself to forget, to be a dad, to pay bills, to fix leaking pipes and broken washing machines, and pretend that the ocean wasn't whispering inside my skull. But then one night I got another message from an unknown number. Just coordinates and the words, "We were wrong," and my stomach knotted because I knew it was Lydia. So I waited until Emily was asleep, and I sat in the kitchen staring at the phone, arguing with myself like some idiot. Don't go, just delete it. Be normal, but curiosity is a hook, and guilt is the line that drags you. So the next morning I lied to Emily. Told her I had a job out of town for a day or two. Kissed her forehead, promised I'd bring candy. And I drove until the roads turned thin and unfamiliar, then dirt, then nothing. And there at the end of everything stood an old abandoned research facility that looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. Inside smelled like bleach and rust, and I called, "Lydia?" And her voice floated back, tired and too calm. "Down here," and I followed the echo to a basement room glowing faintly with the same soft, wrong light, and she looked thinner. Eyes sunken but focused, like she hadn't slept in weeks. And I said, "What did you do?" She didn't answer, just pointed at a glass tank where a sliver of the mineral floated suspended in fluid, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. And she whispered, "It's not just rock. Matt, it reacts, it organizes, it remembers." I felt every hair on my arms rise while I kept backing away, saying, "We destroyed the rig. We burned everything." She shook her head and said, "You don't understand. It doesn't die. It adapts. It spreads in dust, in water, in air, tiny, patient, invisible. It learns the body and then rewrites it." I thought of the men peeling themselves apart without screaming, and I whispered, "Turn it off." But she smiled in this sad, resigned way and said, "I've tried. It always comes back." And that's when I noticed the bandage at her wrist and the faint glow beneath it. I whispered, "Lydia, what did you do?" And she said softly, almost apologizing, "We needed a host." I felt sick. Like the floor fell away, and she added, "I can hear it sometimes, like singing underwater. Not angry, not cruel, just curious, and I think it called us, Matt." I think that sound wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Suddenly there was a tremor through the building. Glass rattling, dust falling. Alarms that shouldn't even have power flickered awake. She grabbed my arm and hissed, "You need to go. Take Emily. Go somewhere far inland, somewhere quiet. Don't tell anyone." And I said, "I'm not leaving you." But she smiled again. Softer this time, like she already lived somewhere else. And said, "You already did, back on the rig." And the tremor grew into a deep shudder. The tank began to crack, hairline fractures lighting up like lightning trapped inside glass. And all I could think was, not again, not here. Not this time, so I turned and ran. Hearing her call after me, not words, just my name. But there was something layered beneath it, another voice, deeper, older, following through the walls. I hit sunlight and didn't stop until my lungs burned and the world narrowed into sound and heartbeat and fear. Driving home, my hands shook on the wheel and the sky felt heavier somehow, like clouds hanging lower than they should, and every puddle on the road shimmered faintly when headlights touched it. And I kept whispering, "It's fine, it's fine, it's fine," knowing it wasn't. Knowing I'd just watched the future crack open like a shell. When I got back, Emily hugged me and said, "You look tired." I laughed too hard and too long because I didn't know how to tell her the truth. That the ocean didn't stay at the ocean, and monsters don't always look like monsters at first. Sometimes they glow. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they learn how to use our voices. That night, as she slept, I sat in the dark garage again, staring at that faint glowing stain on the floor, listening carefully, waiting to hear whether the world had finally decided to answer back. And I realized something horrible and simple. We didn't survive to tell the story. We survived to witness whatever comes next.